His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Scotchandra Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga, glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 28, Puranjana becomes a woman in the next life. Text 39. Aste,
Aste,
Stanur,
Stanur,
Ivaikatra,
Ivakatra,
Divyam,
Divyam,
Varshasatam,
Vashasatam,
Stiraha,
Shiraha,
Vasudeve,
Vasudeve,
Bhagavati,
Bhagavati,
Nanyat,
Nanyat,
Vedovahan,
Vedovahan,
Pratim,
Ratim,
Aste Stanur Ivaikatra,
Aste Stanur Ivakatra,
Divyam Varshasatam Stira,
Divyam Vashasatam Stira,
Vasudeve Bhagavati,
Vasudeve Bhagavati,
Nanyat Vedovahan Pratim,
Nanya Vedodvahan Yatim,
Aste Stanur Ivaikatra,
Aste Stanur Ivakatra,
Divyam Varshasatam Stira,
Divyam Vashasatam Stira,
Vasudeve Bhagavati,
Vasudeve Bhagavati,
Nanya Vedovahan Pratim,
Nanya Vedodvahan Ratim,
Aste Stanur Ivaikatra,
Aste Stanur Ivakatra,
Divyam Varshasatam Stira,
Divyam Vashasatam Stira,
Vasudeve Bhagavati,
Vasudeve Bhagavati,
Nanya Vedovahan Pratim,
Nanya Vedodvahan Ratim,
Aste stanuri vaikatra.
Aste stanuri vaikatra.
Divyam varsha shatam stiraha.
Divyam varsha shatam stiraha.
Vasudevi bhagavati.
Vasudeve bhagavati.
Nanya vedo vahanratim.
Nanya vedo vahanratim.
Aste stanuri vaikatra.
Aste stanuri vaikatra.
Divyam varsha shatam stiraha.
Divyam varsha shatam stiraha.
Vasudeve bhagavati.
Vasudeve bhagavati.
Nanya vedo vahanratim.
Nanya vedo vahanratim.
Aste stanuri vakatra.
Aste stanuri vakatra.
Divyam varsha shatam stiraha.
Divyam varsha shatam stiraha.
Vasudeve bhagavati.
Vasudeve bhagavati.
Nanyat vedo vahanratim.
Nanya vedo vahanratim.
Aste stanuriva katra.
Aste stanuriva katra.
Divyam varsha shatam stiraha.
Divyam varsha shatam stiraha.
Vasudeve bhagavati.
Vasudeve bhagavati.
Nanya dvedodvahanratim.
Nanya vedo vahanratim.
Aste,
Aste
remains.
remains.
Stanu,
Stanu
immovable.
immovable.
Iva,
Iva
like.
like.
Ekatra,
Ekatra
in one place.
in one place.
Divyam,
Divyam
of the demigods.
of the demigods.
Varsha,
Varsha
years.
years.
Shatam,
Satam
100.
100.
Stiraha,
Stiraha
steady.
steady.
Vasudeve,
Vasudeve
unto Lord Krishna.
unto Lord Krishna.
Bhagavati,
Bhagavati,
the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Na,
Na,
not,
Not
anyat,
Anya,
anything else.
anything else.
Veda,
Veda,
did know.
did know.
Udvahan,
Udaha,
possessing.
Possessing.
Ratim,
Ratim,
attraction.
Attraction.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation. In this way, he stayed immovable in one place for 100 years by the calculations of the demigods. After this time, he developed pure devotional attraction for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and remained fixed in that position. Purport. Bahunam Janmanamante Gyanavama Prapadite Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sadurlabhaha. Quote, after many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Bhagavad Gita 7:19. Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is everything, and one who knows this is the greatest of all transcendentalists. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that one realizes this after many, many births. This is also confirmed in this verse, where the words Divyam Varsha Shatam, quote, 100 years according to the calculations of the demigods, end quote. According to the calculations of the demigods, 1 day, 12 hours is equal to 6 months on earth. 100 years of the demigods would equal 36,000 earth years. Thus, King Malayadwaja executed austerities and penances for 36,000 years. After this time, he became fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. To live on earth for so many years, one has to take birth many times. This confirms the conclusion of Krishna. To come to the conclusion of Krishna consciousness and remain fixed in the realization that Krishna is everything, as well as render service unto Krishna, are characteristics of the perfectional stage. As said in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 22, text 62, Krishna Bhakti Koila Sarva Karma Krita Hoya. When one comes to the conclusion that Krishna is everything, by worshiping or by rendering devotional service unto Krishna, one actually becomes perfect in all respects. Not only must one come to the conclusion that Krishna is everything, but he must remain fixed in this realization. This is the highest perfection of life, and it is this perfection that King Malaya Dvaja attained at the end. Om Jnana Timirandasya Garanjana Shalakaya Chakshu Amilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this King Malaya Dvaja is the husband of Vaidarbi, who was in a previous life King Puranjana, who is connected with this whole allegory of the city of 9 gates. So it's a fascinating allegory. I found it very useful in understanding the nature of the soul, the subtle body, subtle material body, the gross physical body, the process of self-realization, and many other things are explained in this wonderful allegory. In particular, the nature of the relationship of the soul with the subtle material body and the gross physical body. The whole allegory begins with King Puranjana leaving whatever place he was in and coming in the course of his wanderings to the city of 9 gates. He came to this city and he went to a garden within the city, and then he met this young woman in the park, and she was accompanied by a chief bodyguard who had 10 assistants, and then there were many maidservants and servants along with her, and also a serpent with 5 heads. So the Puranjana was attracted to her, thought she was a suitable, possibly wife or something, and he began inquiring from her, you know, you're very nice. And she kind of asked him, you know, you can stay in this city with me and we can enjoy life. So he wanted to do that, but he was curious, so he asked, "Who are these people with you? Who's this snake with the 5 heads? And who's this big bodyguard? And who are these 10 other tough-looking guys? What's up?" Said, "Well, I don't know. I just was always, they've always been with me, and it's sort of like the materialists, they don't take into account all the complexities of material life. How did we get here? How did we become conscious? Oh, somehow or other it happened by chance. Like in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains, asatyam apratishtam te jagat ahur anishwaram. There's a certain class of philosopher who thinks there's no arrangement to this whole universe. It just happened by chance. Everything is just going on. And they don't really think about it, think about their situation. So the girl in this allegory, she's kind of like that. She says, "Well, these things have always been with me." But turns out that they do have meaning. Basically, they are the different parts of the whole subtle material body. That's an important lesson that I kind of learned from this whole allegory, because in a simple way, we generally think the subtle material body is made of mind, intelligence, and false ego. But according to the Bhagavatam and this allegory, it also includes the subtle senses. The living entity, conditioned soul in the material world, has a set of senses. There are 5 knowledge-acquiring senses, the jnana indriyas, and then there are the working senses, the karma indriyas. And the actual senses are the subtle senses. They're grouped around the mind. These 10 senses are grouped around the mind. And sometimes Srila Prabhupada had called the mind the 11th sense. And it performs a function. It coordinates the activities of the working senses and the knowledge-acquiring senses. And this is something that the material scientists don't understand. When they think about consciousness, they think consciousness is generated by the neurons in the brain. They have that idea that matter organized in a very complex way in the brain actually produces consciousness. They have that theory. And they've never shown it to be true. They have about 20 or 30 different competing theories about how it may have happened. I once went to, it was about 25 years ago, I went to a science conference on consciousness. And there was one scientist there, his name was Christoph Koch. And he said, in 25 years, we'll have this all figured out. No doubt about it. We're well on our way to figuring it out. So I went last year to the same conference that's held every few years. And he was there, and he said, I was wrong. You know, we're no closer to figuring it out than we were 25 years ago. And actually, they had made a bet at that time. You know, two scientists. You know, he had made a bet with another scientist that in 25, I bet you that in 25 years we'll have this all figured out. But they didn't, and he lost the bet. I think this year at a conference on consciousness studies, he had to pay the debt. It was like a bottle of wine or something like that. They're kind of, you know, these materialists, they value such things. You know, so they had gambling, intoxication, and probably some other things going on too. But one problem they have with this brain producing consciousness idea is that the way they understand things, one part of the brain is dealing with vision. And not just all vision, but one part of the brain is dealing with color, one part of the brain is dealing with shape, another part of the brain is dealing with movement, another part is dealing with hearing, and, you know, like right now we're having a sensory experience. You know, we're seeing, we're hearing, everything is joined together. And in consciousness studies, this is called the binding problem. How does the brain integrate all these different inputs so that it produces one display that's updated in real time, where the audio and the visual and the tactile and, you know, smell and taste can all be integrated into one display that's updated instantaneously at every moment. They can't figure that out. But in this model of that's suggested by this allegory in the City of Nine Gates, you have the mind. You know, they have no conception that there's a subtle material element called mind. And according to this City of Nine Gates analogy, it's mind that is acting kind of like some multimedia software that's integrating the inputs of the knowledge acquiring senses. And of course, the display that we have around us is interactive. We also have the working senses. The knowledge acquiring senses are the visual sense, the tasting sense, the smelling sense, the tactile or touching sense, and what I leave out? Eyes, ears, nose, smelling sense, tongue, tasting sense. So they're all grouped around the mind, which kind of integrates them, but also the working senses are there as well. Arms for organizing things, playing cartels, beating madunga drums, typing on your computer, or we have this working sense, the arms. And then if we want to move, we have the legs that we walk here and there, we operate vehicles with. The whole thing is interactive. We not only get all these sensory inputs, but we have our outputs as well. The voice for speaking, the arms for doing all kinds of things, the legs for moving, and then the organs of evacuation and reproduction as well. So it's a whole interactive sensory apparatus. And it's all coordinated by the mind, which is like some, as I said, multimedia software, interactive software program that's integrating all this. So the subtle material body includes the subtle senses, like when King Paranjana is forced out of the city of 9 gates by Kalayavana, who attacks the city with his 360 white soldiers and 360 black soldiers. In other words, the time factor is gradually attacking the gross physical body. And when Paranjana was forced to leave the city of 9 gates, when it had been attacked and destroyed and burned, he left with the queen, his queen, who represents intelligence, good intelligence, and in some cases, as you heard if you were here during earlier chapters of this 4th canto, the queen kind of represented on the good side the intelligence that leads one to Krishna consciousness. But on the other side, she could also be a bewildering kind of influence that makes one attached to material sense gratification and keeps one entangled in the cycle of birth and death. But the gross physical organs, like these things, the ears on the side of the head, that's not the actual hearing sense. The actual hearing sense is part of the subtle material body. And it's the same with all the senses, including the working senses. The working sense of my voice is getting a little ragged. So I engaged my working sense of my arm to pick up a glass of water and tastes nice. So, like we have the working sense, the arm. And that is just the gross physical organ that allows the subtle working sense of the grasping and organizing power of the limb to operate. And we see just that in medical science, there's a very unusual phenomenon called phantom limbs. Phantom limb means a person may lose the gross physical organ, but they still feel they have it. They have that grasping sense, and they can feel it. They can feel pain in it, like in a specific location in it. And it's very difficult to understand. Sometimes they say, oh, there's just a map of it in the brain, and but in this City of 9 Gates allegory, where we see that the senses are part of the subtle material body, we have a possible explanation for it. Namely that even though the physical organ, or limb is gone, in the subtle material body, the sense is still there. And once I was at a conference on consciousness studies, I was talking about this topic, and a medical doctor came up to me and said, some people report, that they have 4 arms. I thought that was kind of interesting. But in any case, Srila Prabhupada once said that if the existence of the subtle material body can be demonstrated, to scientists, then everything else will fall in order, fall in place from that. So it's this city of 9 gates is a very useful analogy, because it's very sophisticated the way that it's set up, and it's also highly interesting. And the other way I find it very helpful is in understanding the position of the soul. People talk about what is the source of the soul? How did we come to this world? So the Paranjana represents in this allegory the soul. So the soul has an original place where it belongs. Either you could say it came from that original place, or it belongs in that original place. Different people have different ideas. The way I read this allegory, the king, this comes out particularly in the end, because when the king leaves or is going away from the place where he really belongs, he's accompanied by an unknown friend. So the unknown friend doesn't appear very much in the course of his stay in the city of 9 gates with the queen and her bodyguards and all the maidservants and servants that represent the unlimited material desires that a conditioned soul has. The unknown friend isn't mentioned very much in that connection, but in this part, in the end of the allegory, where Paranjana has become Vaidarbhi, and the wife of King Malayadvaja, King Malayadvaja is at the end of his life. He's gone to the forest and is preparing to leave his body, which he eventually does. And then Vaidarbhi, his wife, she's very dedicated to her husband. She prepares his body for burning on a funeral pyre, and she wants to enter into it. But then the unknown friend comes and said, okay, you weren't really the husband of the queen like you thought you were. You're not the daughter of the king like you think you are now. You're not the husband of this. We belong in another place. don't you remember, thousands of years ago we were there like two swans swimming in a beautiful lake. So in other words, the unknown friend finally comes and reminds the soul that was Paranjana, that was Vaidarbhi, that you and I come from somewhere else, and this is not your real home. You should go back to your real home. So, so this world in which we live, we're here because we're not at the present moment qualified to be in our original home. And this world has been provided to us for two purposes. Either we can become more and more entangled in the illusion, or we can wake up to our real identity. So this world is kind of like a little virtual reality system where we can remain in it if we use our free will in that way. We can keep pursuing the because the queen, as I said in this analogy, she can represent either the good intelligence that brings us closer to Krishna, as Krishna says, Tekam sadhana yuktanam vachapurvikam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mama bhayati te. If one is devoted to Krishna, makes that the one's desire not to enjoy independently from Krishna, but to be an eternal servant of Krishna. One uses one's free will to decide in that way and act in that way, then Krishna gives the intelligence by which one can come to him. So that's good intelligence. And sometimes the queen, who represents intelligence in the analogy, was trying to give Paranjana good instruction, how to wake up to his real nature. But he chose to look at intelligence in a different way. He wanted to use intelligence to enjoy separately, independently, and so she connected him with the whole apparatus of the material body, which includes a subtle material body and a gross physical body. And we learn about reincarnation because Paranjana was so attached to the queen, his wife, in a material sense, he had to take birth. Yam yam bhapi smaran bhavam chachyanti kalebram tam tam ivaiti kante sadatan bhava bhavitaha. Whatever the state of one's subtle material body is at the end of life, one attains that state in the next life. So because his mind was focused on his wife, the queen, he took birth as Vaidarbhi. So Krishna Bahirmukha Bhogavanshikare Nikatasta Mayatare Japati Atare. So Krishna Bahirmukha, if one turns away from Krishna, then Maya is there, the material energy is there to capture one. And we have a spiritual form, a Sarupa, Jivara Sarupa Hoy Krishnara Nityadas. We have a spiritual form, but it's only good for one thing, to serve Krishna. You can't do anything else with it. So if a soul has a desire to enjoy independently from Krishna, and is Krishna Bahirmukha, turns away from Krishna, then Maya is there to provide a body in which you can try to enjoy separately from Krishna. And that's but we're not that body. Only because we falsely identify with it do we think that. I mean, it's, when you really think about it, it's really a kind of insanity, actually, to identify with this gross physical body and to try to use it to enjoy independently from Krishna. It's it never works out. So, but Krishna makes an arrangement so that although we are identifying with our material body in its gross and subtle forms, he gives opportunities, ways in which the gross and subtle material body can be used in his service. In other words, Krishna enters into our virtual reality where we're trying to enjoy independently from him, and gives us a way to engage each of the senses in his service. He comes in the form of his holy name, that we can hear and chant. Hear with our knowledge-acquiring auditory sense, and chant with our working sense of the voice. And then we can also focus the subtle material mind on it. Krishna says, just focus your mind on me. Madmana, Bhavamad Bhakto. Concentrate on me with your mind. Chant the Hare Krishna mantra with your working senses and hear it with your subtle auditory sense. Taste prasadam, smell the incense offered to the deity. And there are so many types of devotional service we can use to engage the gross and subtle material bodies. Like Krishna told Arjuna, Mam anusmara yudhya cha, remember me and fight. In other words, think of Krishna and perform activities meant for his satisfaction. And then when one engages in that process, gradually one is able to understand, I'm not this body, I'm not the material mind or intelligence. Like we say, I have a hand, I have a leg. That means you're not that not that. And we even observe our mind. Today my mind feels peaceful, today my mind is agitated. So you understand, really you're not your mind either, or your intelligence, or your false ego. So the process of devotional service helps us gradually come to the stage of understanding we're not the gross physical body, we're not the subtle mental body, we're something different. And that something different is our Swarupa, the soul, understanding that. So gradually, the first thing to understand about the Swarupa is Krishna Das, Jivara Swarupa Hoy Krishnera Nitya Das. The identity of the soul is eternal servant of Krishna. So that's the first thing we have to understand, that in terms of our spiritual identity, whatever it happens to be, we're servants. And gradually, you'll learn what kind of servant you are. And there are various options for those who want to be related as a servant in a mood of awe and reverence. There are the Vaikuntha planets, where Krishna is worshipped in his Narayan form with 4 arms, and he's understood to be the ruler, the supreme controller, and is worshipped by his servants in the Vaikuntha planets in a mood of awe and reverence. And then in Lord Chaitanya's movement, there's more emphasis on attaining platform of love of God, where in the advanced stages, the devotees who are situated in those rasas or relationships, they don't have any idea, well, not that they don't have any idea, but they don't see Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. She is the most beloved child, like Mother Yashoda, but even her, sometimes Krishna, once she was looking into Krishna's mouth and looking, seeing if he was eating dirt, and she got a revelation of his universal form and understood, so occasionally they would get some realization like that, but for the most part, not. So anyways, I think class goes to what time? 8:30?
Usually, but with,
Yeah.
with special guests we go longer also.
Okay, well, I won't exercise my special guest privilege by going later. I think I'll stop here. Does anybody have any question or comment? Yes?
Something you mentioned triggered a question in me, which I'm pondering upon for quite some time. You know how we are not, we have to come to realize I'm not this body, I'm not this mind, I'm not the intelligence, I'm also not the false ego. And so it becomes more and more subtle. And in Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna speaks about faith, one verse which I just don't understand properly, it's Sattvanurupa Sarvasya, how faith develops from Prabhupada he translates according to the existence, the faith develops. But then in the purport he writes about how, just one second. Shraddha, faith, originally comes out of the mode of goodness. And so I'm wondering, because in order to believe in my false ego, I also need faith, no? That's somehow the question I have. Is faith even more, where does faith come from? Is it more subtle than, it's not coming from the false ego, apparently, because in order to accept the false ego, there has to be some underlying faith already.
Yeah, well, I think one thing, the unknown friend is super soul. Because when we get in that Krishna Bahirmukha mood, that we've turned from Krishna, Krishna doesn't turn from us. He remains with us as the super soul. And he knows everything we've done in many different lifetimes. So that presence of the super soul as the unknown friend is actually the Chaita Guru, the Guru within the heart. So, like elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, as the super soul, I see the kind of worship, the kind of desire that the soul has, and I give them the faith to, if it's worship the demigods, he gives up that. So I think it has something to do with the super soul. It's the source of different kinds of faith. Because it's stated in some places that this concept of Chaita Guru is something that we don't consider very much, when we're speaking about Guru Tattva. But Srila Prabhupada gives many explanations of Chaitya Guru and says when Krishna, as the Guru within the heart, detects that a soul is interested in turning back to him. And this is something that only it happens at some very deep level, that Krishna is able to detect that a soul wants to return to him. It may not even be a conscious desire of that particular conditioned soul, but Krishna knows the real state of our existence, the sattva. You could say, wasn't that right, the word that was used? State of one's existence.
Yeah.
So Krishna understands very deeply the state of our existence, what we really are at the deepest level of our self, that we may not even be consciously aware of. But when Krishna detects that a soul wants to return to him, or has even the slightest desire to do so, then Krishna arranges, it appears externally in the form of the Shiksha Guru, Diksha Guru, Vartma Pradarshika Guru, and leads the soul into a relationship with them. It's like we say, the Guru is like the external manifestation of the super soul. In other words, the Chaitya Guru is there and manifest externally in the form of Vartma Pradarshika Guru, which means the devotee who initially connects us with Krishna consciousness. I could say in my life, I had Vartma Pradarshika Guru. I was before I became a temple devotee, I was kind of on the fringes of Krishna consciousness, and I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll go live in a temple, and then I would think, no, maybe I'll go down to Florida and enjoy myself on the beach there. And I was traveling by what's called here you would call it, nobody does these things anymore, but at a certain time people did. There was autostop. We call it hitchhiking in English. So I was hitchhiking. I had gotten a Bhagavad Gita at a rock concert, and I had it with me. I knew something about Krishna consciousness, and I was thinking, should I go to a temple? No, maybe I'll go down to Florida. So I was hitchhiking to go to Florida, and the person who was giving me a ride, I had a backpack. In the backpack was my passport, my money, and I had a guitar. And as I was getting out of his car, he just went away with all my stuff. So I was sitting there, and I was thinking, Krishna said, if he's merciful to someone, he'll take away everything, all his possessions. So I think, oh God, that's what happened here. So I called the nearest temple, and a lady answered the phone. She was the wife of the temple president. And I explained to her on the phone, I got this Bhagavad Gita, I read it, I read, that if a devotee is trying to serve Krishna but still has some material attachments, Krishna will take everything away. And I said, that's what happened to me. She said, okay, where are you? And I said, this was the Washington, D.C. temple. I was about 300 miles away from it. And she said, okay, you put down the phone, you go out to the road, you hitchhike to Washington, D.C., and you come to the temple, and don't stop until you get here. So I followed the instruction of my Vartma Pradarshika Guru, and I went to a temple, and I haven't left since. So, but your question is very good, and I think that the person who is observing what our state of existence really is the Chaitya Guru, and Krishna within the heart, the super soul, and he will give the kind of faith that's required to, whether if it's the demigods we want to have faith in, Krishna will give it. But he says, out of all these everybody's actually following my path, but they just don't know it. That everything is Krishna, I think was in the purport here mentioned. So, anything else? Yes?
I have two questions, and one is it possible that when we incarnate on this planet and we did not had a very clear transition from the past life, so maybe we still remember and identify with something from then, like as an example, as a man attracted to man because he was maybe a woman in the past life?
I don't know all the details of these things, but yeah, the example that's given here in the Srimad Bhagavatam is that if one is meditating upon a certain thing at the time of death, then one attains that state. So yes, I say as a general principle, you could say that the state one attains in this life is, if it's something that really is there from the time of birth, that, in other words, like, to attain the physical form of a male or female is kind of, it's something you can observe and see. The identification on the subtle material level, that one perceives oneself as being of a certain gender or attracted to a certain type of person, that's a more subtle thing. So the state of one's subtle body in this life is, we begin with a certain state of the subtle body. Now, this gets into something related to the question of evolution, because when a soul is in the material world, a conditioned soul, it has a subtle material body and a gross physical body. The gross physical body changes lifetime to lifetime. It's, but we have throughout our entire stay in the material world the same subtle material body. And basically what we're doing in each lifetime is changing the state of our subtle material body. And that can be done by the process of devotional service. Eventually, devotional service dissolves the subtle material body, which is, as long as we have it, we're going to take different material, gross physical bodies. So you could say the problem for us is, because we change the gross physical body at the end of each life, we may have had millions of them, but we've only had one subtle material body. So that's what we have to really work on. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it says that the process of devotional service gradually dissolves the subtle material body. But I don't have a really good answer in the sense that I can't quote any direct statement from Guru, Shastra, or Sadhu that I know of, that directly answers your specific question. But the general principles, I think, are there to say that, yes, if one has an attraction to a certain gender, that is something that has resulted from the condition of one's subtle body at the end of one's last lifetime. I mean, that principle is there. Yeah, the specific instance of it that you mentioned, I can't think of any statement in Guru Shastra and Sadhu that directly addresses it, so I would have to say I don't know, but the general principle seems to be there. Was that 2 questions?
Only one.
Okay, so you get your second.
Yes.
This is like sometimes at press conferences. I see in America they have lots of press conferences for the president or the vice president. And the reporters all say, I have 2 questions and a follow-up. But go ahead, ask your second question.
And just for the first one, like we invited once some native people to our community where I lived, and to share their wisdom. And then they came to the point, that if a man is attracted to other men, it's a sickness, and we need to heal it. And then I tried to reflect on that, and then I read it somewhere. I don't remember the book, but it was from Krishna consciousness, that it is like that the possibility is there that you remember a past life. And on Sankirtan, a guy asked me that, is it true that you have like a cycle of an amount of lives where you have to incarnate in a certain sex, like male or female?
I mean, it's a deep topic. In one sense, if one is apart from Krishna consciousness, identifying or is desiring a relationship with, whether it's heterosexual, homosexual, with men, women, anything, that is ultimately considered a kind of disease condition of the soul. So that's something that has to be considered. I mean, there is, Krishna says, Dharma vivruddha kamosmi bharatarshava. I am sex life that is not contrary to religious principles. So, I mean, what the religious principles ultimately are, that's a matter of discussion, But there was another point I was going to make, but it kind of slipped from my mind. I kind of lost my train of thought there. There was another question from here?
That was the second question.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, thank you for your lecture. I wanted to ask, sometimes, I would say it personally, I read in the books that I'm not this body, that I'm not the gross and subtle body. And through the process of Krishna consciousness, we can understand it sometimes through intelligence. But since we are so embodied, we usually identify, even though we practice devotional service and so on. And my question actually is that sometimes we don't know actually who we are. And so the Shastras and the Sadhus, they say you're not this body, you're not this ego, you're not this subtle body, and so on. So the question is who you are, and then the answer is you are a spirit soul. But that's also like very theoretical. And then you said that there are 5 relationships a soul can have with Krishna, and that it is revealed to the person throughout practicing spiritual life. So I just wanted to ask, how is it revealed?
Srila Prabhupada said that if one is practicing Krishna consciousness, sadhana bhakti, that part of that is hearing about the pastimes of Krishna. And Krishna is never alone, he's always with his devotees. Srila Prabhupada said that one becomes attracted to hearing about the pastimes of Krishna with a certain category of devotee. And then one begins to meditate on the relationship. See, that attraction is, again, as I was mentioning, Krishna knows our real state, who we are, what our actual level of advancement is. Krishna knows the state of our existence. And you get the attraction to the relationship that a certain class of devotee has with Krishna. Some will be attracted to the kind of relationship that Krishna has with his friends in Vrindavan. Some will be attracted to the relationship that Krishna's parents have with him. Some will have attraction to the relationships that the gopis aspire to. And it's I've always thought about it in terms of, you have a pot of water on the stove, and you want it to boil, but you can't just instantly make it do that. It has to happen over time. So that's the process as I understand it. That the first thing is to understand one is a servant, because like in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna Das Kaviraj explains that Radharani, Balaram, all the different expansions of Krishna, and they all see themselves as servants of Krishna. So I think it begins with appreciating and understanding and seeing how Krishna reciprocates with us in the process of service. And then it also depends on appreciating Krishna's presence in the hearts of other devotees as well. And in the form of the deity, one can have a certain relationship with the deity. And then there's Krishna's special representatives, the different kinds of spiritual masters. Diksha Guru, Shiksha Guru, Varma Pradarshika Guru. And if one can gradually understand that, yes, Krishna is reciprocating with me. Krishna has given me some mercy. Krishna has, then, it's like any kind of relationship. It has to start somewhere. And gradually develops, and it's reciprocal. So it's not something that's just automatically given. The thing that you said in the very beginning is very important. We learn, I'm not this, I'm not that, but what are we? That's the important thing. That's a very important thing to realize. And Srila Prabhupada once said, we're not just negative. You know, even Hiranyakashipu, the great demon, he would preach, you know, like when Hiranyaksha was killed by Vama, you know, Krishna's incarnate, not Vama, Varaha. When Hiranyaksha was killed by Varaha, the boar incarnation of Krishna, Hiranyakashipu began to preach to the wives and children of Hiranyaksha that, yes, you have to understand you're not your body, you know, and Srila Prabhupada commented, yeah, we can't just stop with you're not this, you're not that. You know, the positive thing has to be there. And when we understand that, Jivara Swarupahoy Krishnera Nityadas, that we're eternal servants of Krishna, then gradually we have to understand what kind of servant we are. And that will depend upon our attraction, our taste, our ability to recognize how Krishna is reciprocating with us through the medium of the devotees, the spiritual masters, the deity. Krishna is trying to give us that. You know, we should be able to recognize it at a certain point. Anything else? Okay. One final. And then the press conference will be over.
All right. And if we come in such a deep relationship with Krishna that we attain the platform of Nishta, or even a more elevated one, is it then, did Krishna already reveal this realization that you're not his body? Or can you still be identified with your body?
Well, we are identifying with our bodies, and therefore we're at the stage where we have to engage our bodies, which are made of senses. We have to engage them in the processes that will purify the senses and the consciousness. Yeah, so, I mean, I'm in a stage where I'm in a gross physical body. I have a subtle mental body, and I can't say that I have some sense that I'm not these things, and I have some sense that I'm a servant of Krishna somehow, but I still have to give attention to how to keep the gross and subtle bodies engaged in Krishna's service. Now, in Srimad Bhagavatam it says that at a certain point, when one understands that one isn't these things, it's said you're almost, the way it's described, I think by Lord Kapila Dev, is that you're like a drunken person, a person who is intoxicated and doesn't know if they've got their clothes on or not. you know, I mean, I haven't reached that stage yet. But even our acharyas say that even if you do achieve that stage, you still behave as if you were a sadhana bhakta, you know, in the sense, like I think Rupa Goswami says that in Nectar Devotion. Even if you reach the stage of Jivan Mukta, where you are no longer identifying with the gross and subtle material bodies, you should still behave as if you were. Okay. Hare Krishna. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai.
His Grace Drutakarma Prabhu ki
Jai.
All this family will live together? So what I will prepare.
Well, they can also split up the lives, the husband and wife can go in the where Saraswati will stay, because it will be on Tuesday. Two can be there.
Okay. It's open, is such a strong open, of course.
Good question.
I check when you was not here, it was closed. Maybe it is.
But I have a lot of key in the office.
In what times they will come?
I don't know. Till day. Till all day.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I wanted to ask, like tomorrow wrote that the van is occupied from 7:45 because Shruti Rupa asked me because of flowers getting
So tomorrow.
and she asked me if we could go at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Then it should work. No?
This is enough time.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Doesn't take long then. Morning. 45 minutes.
Okay. And
5 means 2 and 45 minutes even. 7:45.
and then do
That's enough.
Okay.
Should do it.
And you go to winter tour with Drutakarma Dasa or?
No, I don't go.
But it's the program there or?
There is a program there, not organized by the temple.
Okay, I thought so.
Somebody else.
Okay. But the van is taken for that or?
Yeah, exactly. They drive back and forth.
You think I can go with them?
I think so.
I would really like, because I was yesterday with the university program also. It was really nice experience.
Fun.
Ja, sehr gut.
Fun.
Also etwa für 50 Studenten oder so.
Ja.
Das war schon
Ja,
richtig gut.
das ist
Ja. Das Beste war, wenn das Passat ausgeteilt worden ist, hatten wir die Papadams, diese knusprigen Brot.
Ja.
Und es war wie so transzendentales Geknusper. Also, Shila Prabhupada. Jai Gauranitai ki Jai, Jai Jagannath, Jai Baladeva, Jai Subhadra ki Jai, Jai Nisimha Bhagavan Prahlada Maharaj ki Jai, Jai O Pancha Tattva ki Jai, Jai Guru Parampara ki Jai, Jai Ex-Goswamis ki Jai, Jai Shalagram Shilas ki Jai, Jai Chota Detis ki Jai, Jai Gauranita, Jai Gauranga, Jai Nityananda, Jai Jagannatha Swami, Jai Baladeva, Jai Subhadra ki Jai. Akzeptiere mich einfach als Diener. Bitte akzeptiert mich einfach, bitte lasst mich euch immer dienen. Bitte lasst mich einfach dienen allen meines Lebens entlang. Bitte lasst mich auf diesem Bhakti-Yoga-Pfad weiter voranschreiten. Bitte hilft mir dabei, eine gute Frau zu finden, die auch mit der zusammen mich ausgleichen in allen Bereichen des Lebens entlang kann, mit der zusammen mich zu euch zurückgehen kann. Jai Jagannatha Swami. Jai Jagannatha Swami. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, 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 Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, 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 Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna 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 Krishna Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Jai Jagannath Swami, Jai Baladeva, Jai Subhadra, Jai Jai Gauranta ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Jagannath Swami. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Jai Jagannath Swami.